Anaelle and Lemasson from the University of Plymouth. We'll be talking about how we turn dreams into reality. Just this one. And just stand a little bit to the side if you want.
Hi, sorry, I'm Anaelle. I'm a postdoc at the University of Plymouth, and I was working on the DREAMS project, which was led by the University of Plymouth, PML and CFAS. And today I'll just be giving you an overview of what the project was about and some of the findings that we've had. First, I just wanted to have a little thought for Paul Summerfield, who was the overall PI for DREAMS and the synthesis. Most of you in the room have know Paul or have been involved in the synthesis, and as you know, he sadly passed away last year. So first, DREAMS stands for Decommissioning Relative Effects of Alternative Management Strategies. The overall aim was to build a reliable and robust evidence base to support the decision-making process around the management of offshore structures, in particular oil and gas and offshore wind farm in the North Sea, and to develop a system to show the different effects of implementing different decommissioning strategies. The project had essentially 4 work packages. The first work package was aimed at building the evidence base by creating a coded database or a catalogue of scientific research, if you want. The second work package aimed at using that evidence base and reviewing and analysing the data and information within it, relating to the ecosystem effects of the structures. We then had a work package incorporating that evidence into ecosystem biogeochemical models at the North Sea scale. And finally, we had a work package that sort of worked across the other work packages about sharing the outcomes and delivering wider impacts. I will start with the first work package. I was directly involved in this one. As I mentioned, it's essentially creating an evidence base, a coded database of the research. We used a systematic evidence synthesis approach called a systematic map. To do that, we trawled through the peer-reviewed scientific literature using set methodologies. We scanned through over 20,000 articles and in the end retained just shy of 1,000 papers that we coded into that database that all sort of answered the question of what published evidence exists for the effects of the structures while in place and after decommissioning on various components of the marine ecosystem. The database and the report have been published and is fully available online for everyone to use if you may wish to do so. Briefly, some of the key messages and findings from that systematic map is that we actually had very few decommissioning studies. By that we mean real-world sort of case studies of decommissioning structures. We only found 57 articles, which was in contrast with the sheer number of papers relating to the effect of structures while let's see, the presence effect. So we couldn't use the decommissioning case studies in work package 2 as we wanted to do initially, and decided instead to infer the decommissioning effects by looking at the presence effects and see what we would lose or retain depending on which decommissioning options we would be using. Those are only 2 of the multiple heat maps that we created as part of the systematic map. What it does is it shows you the knowledge clusters and the knowledge gaps based on that database of nearly 1,000 studies. In blue and green as your knowledge clusters, and you can see, for example, that we know a lot about purpose-built artificial reefs, especially relating to ecological or community outcomes or species or biological outcomes. We know a lot less on more recent structures such as marine renewable energy installation. We also know a lot when we dug down to sort of population level what those studies were investigating. We see that we know a lot about fish and about invertebrates. They've been quite clearly well studied, but we know a lot less about things like bird, mammals, plankton, or microbes. So moving on to work package 2, this was split into 2 different parts. One that did a review of the ecosystem services relating to offshore wind, and another one on which was a meta-analysis of the ecological effects of offshore structures. The ecosystem service, I will only briefly talk to you about it because Steve, who is here, will be giving you a more in-depth talk in the next session. So essentially, part of the work was a global literature review of the effects of offshore wind farms on key ecosystem services, and this was based on that Work Package 1 database of studies. And there was also a second part which looked at the effect of decommissioning oil and gas and shipwrecks on ecosystem services, but this has not yet been published. Some of the key findings was that essentially, even though there's a considerable amount of research, I need to hurry up, on the ecology of marine artificial structures, there's very large gaps remaining in our understanding of the linkages and interaction with ecosystem services in society. And as you can see from this diagram, which is equivalent of a heat map as well, I suppose, that some ecosystem services were enhanced by the presence of offshore wind farm and others were negatively impacted. But like I said, Steve will go into more detail about this. The second part was a meta-analysis of ecological effects of offshore structures. What we did, we used the knowledge clusters identified in the first work package and ask a series of questions relating to the effect of the structures on fish and invertebrates, especially. Won't go into details into the methods, but we scanned through that database of research and ended up selecting 109 articles, which provided us with 531 effect sizes. So this is a global meta-analysis. We run those data and through multiple meta-analytical models. And I will briefly talk through some of the results. So on the left is, these are orchard plots. They're essentially a type of forest plots. And they show you whether the structure had an impact on the ecological outcome or whatever it was that we put into the models. Here on the left, we compared sites with structures to natural sedimentary sites. And what we can see is that offshore wind farm had no significant effect on, these are all the ecological outcomes combined, pooled. Oil and gas had some moderate positive impact. And so potentially there is additional benefits of oil and gas and they could act as oases in the desert. On the right-hand side is essentially the same style of analysis, but these are all the studies that compare the structures to natural reefs. And I will go into a bit more detail later about this, but as you can see, there was very few studies for oil and gas and offshore wind farm, but what we can tell in purple are your purpose-built artificial reefs, and there was no significant difference between the ecological outcomes identified at a purpose-built artificial reef to a natural reef, which is it's a good thing in this instance. It means they act as we want them to act as artificial reefs. So this is the same plot as before, but instead of pulling all the different ecological outcomes, they were split, so abundance, biomass, and diversity. And focusing just on the offshore wind farm and oil and gas, what we can take is actually if we consider an oasis in the desert as being a diversity, like enhancing diversity, they don't serve that purpose, and only purpose-built artificial reef seems to be boosting diversity when compared to natural sedimentary habitats. The bottom part is, again, those same comparisons, but comparing them to natural reefs. And the main message that I want you to take from this is that we actually found very few studies that compare those offshore structures to natural rocky reef habitats. And this limited our assessment of their ecological effects and prevented us from drawing any sort of conclusions on whether they actually could act as de facto artificial reefs. So in theory, if oil and gas and offshore wind farm acted as artificial reefs, decommissioning them in the sea, for instance, by toppling them or reefing them or whatnot, could assist us in reaching ecological conservation targets and achieve environmental net gains. But here we've actually found no evidence to support this common assumption, but only limited ecological benefits if we compare them to natural sedimentary habitats. So some final points about this second work package is that there were clear research and evidence gaps which limited our analysis and interpretation. And some of that evidence dates from the searches in 2021, so potentially are already out of date. There's been, as you all know, a clear research effort towards understanding this sort of things. And ultimately, ideally, we'd like more direct evidence from decommissioning case studies, which is a point that we've made in an opinion piece in TREE last year. The third work package was the modelling work package. And again, I'm just going to give an overview because there will be talks in the next session by Molly, who will go into more details in some of those aspects. The first part of the work package 3 aimed to model the epiphenol growth associated with the structures using the FBCOM SM biogeochemical ecological model and applying it to a range of decommissioning options. What they show is that the effect of offshore oil and gas structures on the primary productivity and biogeochemical fluxes was spatially limited and practically negligible at the scale of the model resolution they used. And this was in contrast with the effect of offshore wind farms, where placement density is much higher, leading to detectable impacts on primary productivity and chlorophyll production. The second part of work package 3 aimed to identify connectivity hotspots in the North Sea and using a combination of, sorry, I'm reading it from the side, I do apologize, high-resolution hydrodynamic modeling, biogeochemical modeling, particle tracking, and a graph network analysis. They generated a spatial connectivity importance index under a novel Everything is Everywhere framework. And what this provided was a generic overview of maximum potential connectivity in the North Sea. Hopefully I've mentioned that right. But Molly will go over this with you this afternoon in the next session. Finally, the work package 4 was sharing the outcomes and delivering impact. And very briefly, those are some of the outputs that we've had. From the first work package, we've had the protocol published, which lays out the different methodology and the aims of that work package. The report and the database have been published, and as I mentioned, is freely available for you to use as well. We have a plain language summary for policymakers that have been published and is supported by the Collaboration for Environmental Evidence, and an opinion piece in TREE, which sort of lists the challenges of evidence-informed decommissioning. The second work package has 2 different publications that review of the effect of offshore wind farm on ecosystem services and the meta-analysis of ecological effect of offshore marine artificial structures. We have 2 manuscripts in prep for work package 3, which hopefully will be out by the end of the year. And there's been wider sort of engagement and impact work, both to date and ongoing and planned for the future. We've had several presentations at the different iterations of SIMEs, as well as the Insight webinars, presentations with to OSPA, various press releases, a radio interview, a policy brief, which I have outside if anybody is interested, and a couple of videos. We have one that's being launched today. The QR code is in the poster outside if you would like to watch the video about the whole DREAMS project in general. So that's it from me. Thank you.